sticking with different ways of looking at mental health just for a little while longer, it's occurred to me that what might be a good way of looking into it would be to do a visual kind of an image rather than using too many words. So if it could be possible to paint a nice, simple visual picture of what we mean, that would be different from talking at length about it. So the image really is the image of what we could call a paradoxical river, which is the river that is talked about by the Zen poet in his little poem, when he says that he's standing up on the bridge over the river, and it's as if he's coming over all a bit funny, because he's looking and you can notice that the river's standing still but the bridge is flowing. And the thing about that is, of course, it's an inversion. It's an inversion of how we normally see things. We've got this standpoint which we take for granted that's very solid. It's like a platform, and the platform's always there, and we can look out at life from the platform. And no matter what life does, the platform's just reassuringly solid. And this gives us the ability to assign meanings to what we see based on the solidity of the platform that we're standing on. Because if we didn't have a platform to stand on, we didn't have a solid platform, we wouldn't be able to assign meanings to anything. Because meanings are always a projection of a static viewpoint, or what we call meanings, what we generally refer to as meanings. So there's this Alice in Wonderland quality where everything gets turned around on us, and all of a sudden everything's like a mirror image of what we thought it would be. And it's ultimately confusing, because there's nothing more confusing than finding that actually the platform that you've been relying on your whole life and that everyone else relies on is actually something that flows, because then it's not a platform, obviously. So there's nothing more confusing than that, and confusing not in the sense of being a bit befuddled, but in the sense of being completely mind blown by it. It's like, what the hell? We can't get our head around it at all. So it's like a Alice in Wonderland type phenomenon. And so this phenomenon of suddenly seeing everything in this way which we're not familiar with, where our basis is actually gone. If, for example, the Zen gentleman had checked in to see a mental health specialist, and they'd be looking at him and humming and hawing, saying, I see. So the bridge was flowing, was it? And the river was completely still, and you were on a flowing bridge. And they'd listen to him for a while, and they'd inevitably come to the conclusion that this viewpoint is a sign of mental ill health of some sort, possibly psychosis. But that's not the point at all, because it wasn't just that the Zen guy was having a funny time as he crossed the bridge and then forgot about it. This funny turn is the whole epitome of Zen. That's the whole epitome of seeing reality, because when we do see reality, the tables are turned on us in a big way. So we could also talk about this river in a different way, because when we talk about the river metaphor, it's the river is the great river of change is a river, but there's no banks. We can't sit on the bank and watch the river go by, basically, because it's not that type of a river. It's a river where everything is flowing and there are no banks. So the banks are flowing, along with the river, and the trees on the banks are flowing, and the cows in the meadows are flowing. It's all flowing, it's all flow, everything's flow, and there's no platform. The clouds in the sky are flowing. The birds, as they sit in the trees, are flowing. And you're sitting there and you're flowing along with it. Which brings to mind the Beatles line, "Turn off your mind, relax and float downstream." I can't remember what comes next, but it's that kind of feeling. So we're just flowing, and there's nothing solid to hold on to. Or as Chogyam Trungpa says, we're falling with no parachute. But also, there's no ground. The good news is, according to Chogyam Trungpa, the good news is there's no ground, so that's not so bad. So that's a picture of what David Bohm calls the hollow movement, the movement that is everything, the whole movement, the movement in which happens without a context, without a fixed context, the movement which is everything, and we don't know where it came from, and we don't know where it's going, because there are no fixed destinations or places to come from or go to anyway. There's no ground. So we might be falling, but there is no ground. So then we can say that this is a picture of the hollow movement, which is a picture of how things are. If we are prepared to entertain the idea that that's how they could be. And it's certainly one way of talking about the universe or talking about reality. It's kind of more of a mystical way than a rational way. Rational arguments don't say this, but we won't get too hung up on what rational arguments say or don't say, because the rational argument always comes from a platform, and the rational argument always takes the platform for granted, doesn't mention the platform, but everything they say is just the platform, the platform, the platform, and yet we're not mentioning the platform. And we're certainly not trying to say why the platform is a valid point of view. The whole point of the rational argument is we'll just carry on as if it's a valid point of view. We'll never talk about it or question that at all. And we'll create all these structures. We'll create all these castles in the air. So that's rationality. So then if we can say this is a way of looking at how things are, this is a way of looking at the hollow movement, we can talk about mental health as being part of the way things are, or not alienated from the way things are, or at one, as they say, with the way things are. And what that really means is we're moving to, we're flowing to, we're not holding on to anything, we're not defining ourselves in terms of any platforms. So that's the state of mental health. Mental health is just where we perceive reality. We're not afraid to perceive reality, where we're not afraid to be part of reality, even though we can't define reality. Even though nobody can define reality, and there is nobody to define it, because there's nobody outside of reality anyway. So that gives us a way of looking at mental health, which is very simple, but at the same time, we'd never come across it, because what we do in practice is we find something to hold on to, even though there is nothing, but we kind of contrive to find something to hold on to anyway. So you can imagine that we're in this river, but we've actually got a kind of a little boat or something, and we've moored this boat to a big post. Now the post is ultimately not there at all, but in practical terms it is, because it does that. We do find a way of anchoring ourselves to our illusions. That we're anchored very firmly to our illusions. Nothing is firmer than our anchoring to our illusions. No glue is stickier, no glue is stronger, no super glue could ever beat it. We're well and truly stuck to our fixed illusions, which is the way we want it. So that the current of the river is pulling us, and the boat goes a little bit and it stops, the rope goes taut. We aren't going anywhere. And we've made sure, because we've tied a good few knots in it, and we're not going to go down the river wherever that goes. So then this is our life in resistance to the flow. And we then define everything in terms of our static position of being moored to this big post. And if we look at what's going on, what the nitty-gritty of our life is, down to the finest detail, everything we do really is about validating and perpetuating the solidity, making a world of our fixed position, making a world of this situation of being non-flowing. So the flow doesn't even come into our attention at all. We make a whole world out of this business of that we are this and that things are also this. So whenever we say, oh, this is this, or I am that, that's a static picture. That's when we're resisting the flow. So we create a whole world out of this is this, facts and figures, literal meanings. And we have our own way of looking at mental health in this case, because for us, mental health is how well we're tied to the post. You could look at someone and say, there's no movement there at all. They're not moving at all. They're really well tied down. So that's good mental health. If a rope gives way and we start swinging off into the middle of the current, that's not good mental health, like I was saying about the Zen gentleman. For us, that isn't mental health. So this is a topsy-turvy, backwards kind of a thing. It's not even that we don't, that we say, oh, the flow isn't mental health, because we deny the existence of the flow entirely. All we know is sometimes when the flow impacts on us and causes things to go strange, then we say that this is some kind of error and some kind of mental disturbance or something like that, because we want everything to be same. We want expected to equal actual. E equals A. We don't want any divergence whereby we say, hang on, I was expecting this, but I've got something totally different. How the hell did that happen? For us, that isn't good mental health. Mental health for us is getting what we paid for. We do an action, we want the result to be what we want the result to be. If I make a cup of tea, I want the end product of my procedural activity to be a cup of tea, and absolutely nothing else in the whole wide universe. And then that effective controlling, whereby we get what we want and nothing else, is what we see as mental health. So mental health for us is a finite game. In other words, we're playing in order never to be surprised, as James Carr says. If we were playing the infinite game, and the infinite game is all there is really, but finite games exist within it in a kind of a way. They're allowed within the infinite game. Finite games are part of the infinite game, because the infinite game contains the possibility to be not free as well as the possibility to be free. It's very accommodating in that way. It's got no rules, in other words. The infinite game has no rules. So if we were playing the infinite game, we would be playing in order to be surprised. And when our controlling didn't produce the proper thing that it's supposed to be controlling to produce, we'd be going, yes, this is interesting. How cool is that? Look at this. What do you reckon on that? And we'd be getting, when that happens, we're moving, we're flowing. The meanings of things are changing. We're changing. As we go down the river, we find that we're not the same person. We're moving away from who we thought we were. So the river is really a moving away from what we thought things were, and a moving away from who we thought we were. And then there's this feeling of, oh my goodness, it's all new. I'm not that person anymore. The world isn't the world anymore, because the world I used to believe in is a projection of who I thought I was, wrongly so. A case of total mistaken identity, as Wei Wu Wei says. which Wei Wu Wei says is our basic confusing problem, mistaken identity every time. Go and see the doctor and you come out with all this stuff. He said, I see your problem. Mistaken identity. You think you're this fixed personality, this fixed entity. That's causing you problems. And it will cause you problems. So it can be seen that mental health, when we look at it in terms of the infinite game, it's nothing to do with controlling effectively or being able to project our will upon the world effectively or enforce our assumptions effectively. All of that stuff is conservative, consolidatory stuff, not exploratory. It's all denial of reality type stuff, which we are calling mental health, because that's the way things work in a denial. We turn our denial into a virtue. We don't go around saying, I'm denying the truth. We say, no, I am asserting the real truth. And what we call the real truth is the denial of the truth. So we turn what we're doing into a virtue. And we expect to be rewarded for it and receive honours for it and be given medals and stuff like that, because we've been doing this great thing, which is actually only just hiding from the truth. But we turn it around as if it's the greatest thing we could ever do. That is the highest value in our world, is to be able to cover up the truth, which means coming out with all sorts of other kind of stuff that we promote that isn't the truth. And actually we never could promote the truth, because the truth isn't something that can or needs to be promoted. It's not something that can be stated or needs to be stated. Only lies need to be stated. That's why we kept so busy the whole time stating them and then getting into fights with people who disagree with us, because we have to protect our lies. So the most basic movement in life, which is always going to be there, is going to be this movement away from who we thought we were, who I think I am. The drift is always happening. We're always drifting into strangeness. Even in the smallest moment of time, that drift is there. But we don't notice it because we don't pay attention to the fine detail, the fine grain of reality in that way. We're looking at our big concepts. We're looking at our the structures created by the mind, which are solid. And we pay attention to that, but we don't pay attention to the fine detail of the texture of reality that's all around us, which is the flow, which is change. We exist in a state of utter and complete denial of that change, which means utter and complete denial of reality too, which is sooner or later going to come back and bite us. Because although we're allowed to get away with that, we don't get away with it scot-free. We get away with it apparently. Then there's a price to be paid for getting away with it in that way, and that price is suffering, because we've divorced ourselves from the reality of who we are, or the reality of what everything is really. And so the reason we do that is because we're very, very much attached to what we think we know, and I'm very, very much attached to who I think I know I am, or the self I think I am. Very, very attached. Not that it's a real thing, but that doesn't matter. I am very, very attached to who I think I am. Very attached. And yet who I am exists in opposition to this flow. Who I am is a knot of tension or clenched resistance in opposition to the flow. So I am in denial of what is to my own benefit. I'm in denial of my own good. I'm in denial of what actually sustains me and nourishes me, because I'm afraid of what sustains me and nourishes me. And the reason I'm afraid is because instead of somehow being able to open up my awareness and see the flow and see that I'm part of this flow, and the flow is okay. It's joyful to be part of the flow, because that is life, and it gives us something that static existence can't. It gives us it equals life, and static existence doesn't equal life. It's a pretense of life, or a caricature of life, which none of us are allowed to turn around and say, hey, this isn't life at all, really, because we're not allowed to say that, because that would spoil things. And we can't say that, oh, it's, even though I have done in the past, society is affirming these fixed images and affirming this idea that we have of ourselves, and it's society's fault, because society is just it's just us. Society is just providing us with what we want, really. And so if there was no such thing as society, if there was just me sitting here, and I'm sitting here twiddling my thumbs and doing whatever the hell it is that I do, and I start to drift, and all of a sudden it's like I've been sniffing nitrous oxide or something. It's like, whoa, I'm not myself. It's like I've come out of myself. For the very, very first part of that movement, it's fascinating, it's exciting, it feels wonderful. It's like, whoa, I'm actually released from the tedium of being myself. It's like, wow, look at that. It's great. As I start to carry on moving, and who I thought I was dwindles in the distance and becomes smaller and smaller, and more apparent as being totally unreal, because who I thought I was only seems real when I'm actually there, in the middle of it. That's the only way it can actually have the illusion of being real. As soon as I start to flow away from it, not only am I moving downstream from it, I can actually see that what I'm moving downstream never existed at all. It was just a function of my funny way of looking at things. And so it's not like I can even orientate myself to that point, because that point doesn't exist anymore. The equilibrium point of being this static ego is dwindling into the pure insignificance of something that doesn't exist and never did exist. So when that happens, there's this moment of absolute terror of wanting to recover what we're losing, what we're in danger of losing, which is the comforting illusion, the security of the comforting illusion. So we really, really want to not go down that stream and find out where that's, or downstream on the river and find out where that river goes. We really, really don't want to. We're not curious about it at all. I mean, it's a very curious thing. Suppose I do wave goodbye to myself and float downstream, like in the Beatles song. Where's that taking me? Do you know, it's something you can imagine we could be curious about, but no, we're not, because fear isn't curious. Fear just wants to go back again. Panic, fear just wants to take us back by whatever means. Okay, thanks for watching.